Hi, everyone. I'm Troy, and this is the Worsted Fiber Podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to the second full podcast of the year so far, and the one with just me. I received a comment from a subscriber there a couple weeks ago. I didn't see it until after I had filmed the last podcast, and it was just, I believe it was from Linda, I want to say. I could be wrong, but if I can find. Yeah, so the comment was basically asking if I still work at Belfast Mini Mills. And yes, the answer to that is yes, I do work at Belfast Mini Mills. I still work at Belfast Mini Mills. Just in case subscribers may have missed the episode in which I had kind of explained a little bit of what happened there between the beginning of November and the end of November when we uploaded podcasts. So long story short, Simone no longer works for Belfast Mini Mills. She decided that she wanted to leave. And since she decided to leave the company, we decided that the podcast wouldn't be quite the same with just Matt and I running the podcast at work like we had been doing before, because what we had been doing there with the podcast is on work hours, which was great. Simone, Matt, and I would get together and we would shoot the podcast. And because Simone no longer works at Belfast Mini Mills, it would be weird for her to come back and do the podcast and not get paid for it like she had been doing before. And it would have been just weird if Matt and I continued to do it. Like, the dynamic wouldn't have been the same. So what we decided to do is that, since the podcast has largely been my baby anyway, that I would just take over as the everything. So like the things that I was doing for the podcast before, we'll call it the shakeup, happened was I was setting up the majority of the equipment. I was making sure that everything was connected properly. I was making sure that sound was okay, the video was okay, and then we would record the podcast together. And all of us would collaborate on exactly what would be talked about, what kind of tangents would be going on, those kinds of things. We didn't plan out the tangents, obviously, but we had an idea of what to do, and each of us contributed that way. And then at the end of the day, what I would do is I would take all of the equipment home. Like the memory cards and stuff. I would take that stuff home, bring it to my computer, and edit the podcast, and then render it, and then upload it, either on my own time when I didn't have the ability to upload it at work, and then eventually I uploaded it using the computer at work. And yeah, so that's what we were doing before. So now the thing that's changed is that I'm recording this at home by myself, and the company Belfast Mini Mills no longer has a direct sponsorship sort of dealie with the Words of Fiber podcast. That's not to say that I'm not going to talk about their yarn. I will talk about their yarn later on today, but that's not to say that we've completely cut ties or anything to that effect. I still work for Belfast Mini Mills, and I do plan to continue working there for, ideally I'd like it to be the job I retire from, as opposed to leave for another job. But yeah, you might be wondering why Simone left. That's not my story to tell, so I'm not going to tell it. And I implore you, please, if you are not close enough to Simone to just like see her and ask about her day, and she would offer that information up to you, without being prompted, please don't go and ask her for that information. I can understand why many of the subscribers would have a desire to know what happened, because I mean, that is human nature. I respectfully request that you don't go as a horde to go and question Simone about something that she may want to keep private to herself. Yeah, so just wanted to touch on that really quick before I get into the main meat of today's podcast. I'm also trying something a little bit different with the microphone, or I'm going to try to at least. So because of how things were set up at work, since the microphones were so much further away from me, Simone, and Matt, because I wanted to keep the microphones out of the shot instead of having like a big microphone like here in front of all of us while we're knitting. So I didn't want that in the shot. So these microphones, which are built to be like right in front of your face, so that way you can talk into them and it doesn't pick up any of the ambient sounds in the room. Since they were quite a bit further away, I had the tendency to project my voice towards them, or at least in such a way that ideally it would bounce somewhere and go back into the microphone. So today I'm just trying a little thing where I'm not going to project quite as much. I'm going to try not to. It's kind of become a habit. But I'm going to try not to project quite as much, because the more I project in this small little room, the more it's going to bounce around and the more it's going to reverb into the microphone. We'll see how that works. And then if that doesn't solve the issue, then I'll look into getting some foam for the back wall where you guys can't see. So that way, at least the sound from my voice, it doesn't reflect back to me immediately like what I can hear and maybe what the microphone is picking up. We'll see. Anywho, update aside. So if you follow our Instagram, which at this point, why don't you follow our Instagram? The link is always down in the description. I copy and paste that. I don't forget that one. So if you follow our Instagram, you've already seen my finished object for the week, because I posted on Saturday because I had a brain fart and forgot to take a picture of it until it was already too dark on Friday for FO Friday. So I finished my Fiber Friends Make Along. So this is the Freddy Beach sock by Nancy Wheeler, and I did this in Lichen and Lace's sock base. I received it from her sock train subscription box, I believe is what it's called. I just got a monthly box for 3 months there towards the end of the fall and into December. This was October's month. It's the colorway Pumpkin. And it was really lovely to work with. And the pattern was really, really nice. Let me see if I can't see. Yeah. So it's really nice. I'm really pleased with how it looks. It's a little bit redder in person than it shows up on camera, because as I was looking there, it did show quite golden yellow as opposed to like a true like pumpkin orange. So the bits and pieces about this, I did this on a 2.25 millimeter needle using my Chiaogu shorties that I got there on my trip to Halifax last spring. And yeah, this little textured stitch, I'm not going to go into any great detail on how to do it because it is a paid pattern, and I would like Nancy to receive any funds that she can for this pattern because it's really worth it. The patterns are really well laid out, really easy to understand. If you follow the pattern, like I didn't for the toe and all of that, it's super, super easy to understand. And yeah, and this one is just a little bit of interest. You just do a little whoop. Every so often, every 6 rows, you do a little hoopy doop, and then you do another purly sort of dealy. And then the rest of the time, you're just knitting and slipping. It's just a really easy, really just interesting sock to do. So you don't have to worry about getting into any of the nitty gritty, into the really complicated stuff with the Freddy Beach sock. I did do a tubular cast on the tip. I will take one of these out so that way you can kind of see. So I did a tubular cast on so that way it kind of rolls over the edge there. I don't know if you can see that because I can't see the camera. Yeah, so that's a tubular cast on. That was the Pearl Soho tubular cast on is what I did with this one. And I used a larger needle. So I cast on using my 2.75 millimeter needles. Did the rows did the 2 rows back and forth straight that you're supposed to do when you do that particular tubular cast on, and then I started working in the round using my 2.25 millimeter Chiao Goose. And it really worked out. It makes a really quite stretchy cast on, and it's just a quick little I just did a quick little sew together. There is like a little lippy dealy. You can kind of see it, like there's the seam there. I just kind of like bridged the gap between them and came back around there. So that way uh, it's not super noticeable. It's not super difficult to do that kind of darn in. But when I'm wearing them, you won't be able to quite see the inconsistencies where, like, when you're working in the round, you're working a spiral, so there's always going to be that little off jut when you get to the beginning of the round that kind of hides it a little bit. And there's more that could have been done there, but when I sewed it together, I didn't feel like looking to do more. Yeah. So yeah, I can't say enough nice things about Nancy's patterns. As I mentioned before, they are super easy to read. They're very, very clear. The pictures for the patterns are really well done, so you know exactly what you're going to be getting. And yeah, I really, really like it. So as I mentioned before, I am going to be moving into a new sock pattern from Nancy here in a short while. I'm going to take a break from some socks to get some other things done off of my whip smackdown. But I will show you the yarn. If you are a longtime subscriber, you've seen this ball of yarn before. This is Sea Witch from Nerds with Needles. This is their nerdy sock base. And I am going to be doing Nancy Wheeler's Ravishing sock in these. I think this would be a really nice base to do it in. That's not so busy of a color that the intricate cabling that is in, like, that design feature that's in the Ravishing socks, I don't think it's going to get lost in this. We'll see. And if it does, I'll just do them anyway, because I just want to do them. So I know that I said on my last podcast that I'm largely not going to be talking too much about works in progress on the third week podcast. I don't really know what to call this yet, because like it is the second podcast of the month, but it happens in the third week, and sometimes there's another. Yeah, still figuring some of that stuff out. But for now, I'll just call it the second podcast of the month. I know that I mentioned that I wouldn't be doing too much talk about whips during the FO podcast. There we go. That's what we'll call it. But I do want to talk about this one. So again, if you follow our Instagram, you'll know that on Whip Wednesday, I uploaded a picture of, looks to be ribbing at the bottom of something. So this is the beginnings of the Sylphide jacket by Fable Knitwear, and the designer is Helene Arnesen? I don't know. Anyway, this was a pattern that was shown to me by my roommate Jessie, and she wanted me to make this for her. And it's a really, really cute, like bishop sleeved, balloon sleeve, puffy sleeve. I think technically they're bishop sleeves. Cardigan with a like a boat neck to it. It's a really nice cardigan. And like there's a little blue bell pattern on the back. Really cute. I really like how it's been put together. The problem arises is how the pattern is written, and a few other things. On the Ravelry project pages, there was some criticism. I'm not trying to call this designer out or anything like that. There was some criticism about this pattern not being size inclusive. And it seems that the way that the pattern was written was that the like the showpiece that was written was that was knitted up for this pattern. It was knit for a very petite person. It is clear to me that the way that it was scaled was done mostly with math, and unfortunately doesn't really work out properly. I knew that I was going to have to make some changes and make a few notes to the patterns as I went along, because one of the things that kind of tipped me off that it wasn't scaled well is that the amount of yarn that it calls for between the smallest size listed as extra small and the largest size listed as extra large is a 50-gram ball of yarn, is the only difference between the two, which the sleeves do take up a lot of yarn, because that's where there's, in some cases, there's more stitches in the bottom, the widest part of the sleeves, than there is in the body for a couple of the smaller sizes. And there isn't really much change between the sizes when it comes to the sleeves at all. So that kind of makes sense, that there is not that big, there's not that much of a difference between the sizes. But going from an 80 centimeter, or that would work out to be about 32-inch bust, to 120 centimeters, which would work out to be about a 48-inch bust, there is going to be more yarn used. There's going to be more than 200 additional yards of yarn used between those two sizes. And it turns out that when I started, I decided that I was just going to take the stitch count for the larger size that was listed and add more stitches to it, because I wasn't certain it was going to fit. And I had done my swatch. My gauge was spot on, because it's 23 stitches for 10 centimeters specifically, and I was dead on that. But after I had finished the first ball of yarn, which accounted for the majority of, well, all of the ribbing and then a few rows of the actual like pattern of the main part of the cardigan, it actually worked out to be about 30% of the body from one ball. So I have enough yarn, I'm pretty sure. It turns out that after I sat down and like worked out the math between just the gauge and the stitch count, that the cardigan would require 10 inches of negative ease to fit the person of the largest size, which that is too much negative ease. For beginners who may not know what negative and positive ease is in a garment, what ease is just the difference of what the size of the garment is compared to how it fits on the body. So when it comes to knitting specifically, a lot of garments for men typically are knit with positive ease. So that way, if the person who is going to be wearing the garment has a 44-inch chest, you would be knitting a garment that would be, 46 inches or 48 inches to give you, 2 or more inches of positive ease. So that way it would fit properly, or to fit in what is considered the style now. When it comes to feminine garments, typically they are knit with negative ease in them. So that way the garment needs to stretch a little bit to fit whoever it's going to be working. A great example, a pattern that has a great example of this is the Flax sweater by Tin Can Knits. It's a really basic beginner sweater. I highly recommend it. I made two actually. It's really easy to follow. But in the size guide, which they offer, I think like, I want to say 40, but it's probably like 18 different sizes. For masculine fits, they recommend 2 inches of positive ease. So if my chest measurement is 44 inches, I would knit the 46-inch for myself. But they recommend for feminine fit to be between -2 inches or 1 or 0 inches of ease, so negative ease. So that way it has to stretch a little bit in order to fit. So I wasn't surprised that there's negative ease in this garment, because it is a feminine garment. But 10 inches of negative ease is really stretching it, no pun intended, of how much ease is works out for the pattern. Going further, reading between the different stitch counts, I'm not going to give them because this is a paid pattern and I don't want to give away any information about the pattern. But going between sizes where the stated busts measurements that are there only differ by about a quarter of an inch. So, or quarter of an inch, like a quarter of the gauge rather. So each increment is really only adding 2.5 centimeters, or adding an inch of extra bust size to it. So really the difference between the smallest size, because there's only 5 sizes included, the smallest size and the largest size, is a bust difference of 5 inches. So it didn't work out. So I did knit quite a bit. I got to my second ball, and then I just it just looked too small for me. It just looked too small. So I went and I got Jessie to, try to pull the garment around on her, and it wouldn't fit. Like, yes, we were able to stretch the garment around her, but like the fabric was stretching so much that there would be puckering everywhere, and that's not the garment that I want to knit. That is probably not the garment that Jessie wants to wear. I want this garment to be something that's going to look great on her, so I had to rip it out. So what I did is I ripped it out, and then I cast on a number of stitches that should work using my own math and the gauge that was listed. I'm not going to change too much more about the pattern. So I would imagine that the height measurements are probably okay. I am going to double check the size measurements from a women's size chart for making cardigans and sweaters and all of that that I got from sistermountain.com. I'll put that link down in the description. It's a free measurement guide that really gives you all the information you need to size a garment. It is fantastic. It goes from 28 to 30 inch or 70 to 75 centimeter size bust, all the way up to a 60 to 62 size bust, 152 to 158 centimeters. And it doesn't just tell you the bust sizes. It gives you your neck, your bust, your waist, your high hip, your hip seat circumferences, as well as how wide of shoulders you should have, all of those kinds of measurements, all in either centimeters or inches, really well laid out. It's fantastic. So if you're ever going to be getting into garments or needing to make changes to garments that you're working on, I recommend grabbing this if you are not confident in taking your own measurements, because this might be really helpful for you. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I'm at with this one. So I have ripped it out, and you might notice that I am tinking back because I made a mistake on my first row after casting on, because I cast on using an alternating long tail cast on. And then as I was knitting and purling my backside so that way I can continue working, I got distracted and I purled where I was supposed to knit and continued on. And even though I thought it looked weird, I continued on. I'm like, it's fine. And then, yeah, so I went and I found where my mistake was, and I have marked it. My mistake is here. So I have to tink back that much and go for it. So that is what I'm working on. This has been my project that I've been working on these past couple of weeks. I haven't had a huge amount of time to knit because we are currently just trying to get a lot of dyeing and spinning and all of that done at work. So that's been taking up the majority of my time. And because it is now winter, we're fully into winter, while Belfast Mini Mills is still open 5 days a week, Tuesday through Saturday. There's a lot fewer customers. And when there are not customers in the store, I don't knit. I'm in the mill the entire time, right? So I don't have as much time to knit these kinds of things, or knit really at all right this moment. So I will continue to peck at this. So shameless plug. Down in the description, you will find a YouTube link to the UPEI Wind Symphony alumni concert that we did, that I took part in back at the end of December between Christmas and New Year's. There is a free link on YouTube that you can watch the entire performance. And if you look closely in the clarinet section, you should be able to see me. Yeah, it went really, really well. I'm really pleased with how the recording is. So this is a recording of the live concert that we did. So we're all in like our concert black and all of that. And if you want to go take a peek at that after this video or at any point, please go ahead and do so. I think that you might be really impressed with what the director, Karim Simon, was able to, like the musicality that it was able to pull out of the ensemble that day. It was quite the experience. And despite us playing in a space that acoustically is not the best, I think we sound really, really good. So I really, really recommend that you go and listen to that ensemble, because it's really some pretty high level of playing by a number of different musicians, ranging from who graduated from as early as 1972 from UPEI and as late as 2021. And yeah, I have not enough nice things to say about that whole experience. So if you wanted to have a little snapshot of what that was like and what the final product of all of these musicians coming together for 3 days. Our first rehearsal was Tuesday afternoon, and this concert took place Thursday evening. I think you'll be really impressed. So at the end of this, I will try to remind you, but at the end of this episode, please, or take a break if you need to, and go take a listen to that. It'll take about an hour, but I think you'll be really impressed. So I think I'll do a little update on my Maker's Dozen. So you've already seen one of them is, that kind of fell off. The first completed item of my Maker's Dozen is the Freddy Beach sock by Nancy Wheeler. So my intent to do a project every month, done and dusted, for this one here. I don't know if I'm going to have another one done next month. I might have to pull the raga out in order for me to have a finished object next month, because I don't want to start anything new. I have too many things on the needles as it were now, since I started this project here. But I might do that just so that way I can get something out in the 5 weeks I have between today's podcast and the next FO podcast. But yeah, so one and done. So I've got 11 more to do. But I do have an update on what I'm going to be doing. I added 2 more projects since the last time that I talked about that. So that brings me up to 9, I believe. So the 2 that I'm going to be doing is, one that you saw before is Little Waves Little Wave, there's no S, Little Wave by Gundren Johnson for Brooklyn Tweed, I believe. So that was the cardigan that I started there last summer out of McCausland's 2-ply. So a nice, really hardy, crunchy wool. Toothy is another word for it. It'll be a hard-wearing one. The reason why I stopped doing it, if you're a new subscriber, is I realized, I knew that I was cutting it close for how much yarn that I had, but I planned to do like little things to make it so that way it saved yarn. So like one of the things that recommended is that you do a really long cuff so that way it gets folded back, and that is how it's to be worn as a full sleeve as opposed to 3/4 sleeves. I made my sleeves, since I don't need to have quite as much space in my sleeves because I don't have guns like Simone. I was making my sleeves a size smaller than what the pattern called for the size that I was making. And I was going to be removing the cabling pattern on the back of the cardigan. So that way it was just the front of the cardigan where the cable patterns were. All these things to save a little bit of yarn. I contemplated even taking out the pockets, even though that was the thing that drawn me to that particular cardigan. But there was a day where I sat down, really worked out the math, got to the point that I almost had a panic attack over the thing. So then I just put it away. Realized I didn't have enough yarn to do it. And as I mentioned there, last podcast, the fabric store that Jesse and I went to in O'Leary, they had what looked to be the right yarn, the right color rather, and it was McCausland's yarn. And I bought 2 balls of it because that's all that I would really need in order to actually complete it as to the specs of that particular cardigan. And it wasn't until 2 or 3 hours later when I glanced at it and I realized that I got too excited about the color. I didn't check to see if it was a 2-ply, and I bought 2 balls of 3-ply. So I bought 2-ply, which works out to be like a worsted weight, size 4 sort of dealy. And that's what I was making my cardigan out of. But then I bought 3-plies, which is on the heavier side of an Aran weight. It's really good for rug hooking and other garments as well. But usually when people are looking for the 3-ply, at least in my experience, is they're looking for rug hooking yarn. And I bought a few balls of the 3-ply. So what I'm probably going to end up doing is very carefully unplying both of these balls and putting them onto my bobbins, my spinning bobbins, and then putting them on my spinning bobbins and then plying them back together as 2-plies. And we'll see how that works out. Like, I'm going to have to do a lot of twist setting and playing with that sort of thing. That is probably going to, if I do end up using the yarn in that way, it'll probably be on the back or in the arms or in the pockets or whatever, something that's not so forward facing. So that way, if there is a huge difference, it's not as noticeable. We'll see how that goes. And the other project that I'm going to be doing, I was just perusing Reddit as a nerd does and came across a knitting post. The designer of this particular shawl, this is the Entwined Queen shawl by Julia Decker. It came up on my screen. I'll put a link down in the description. I haven't asked Julia to use her pictures, so I'm not going to show you on the screen, but I will link her pattern down in the description. This is a beautiful, beautiful shawl. It is done in brioche stitch, which will give me an excuse to learn how to do the brioche stitch rather. And it seems, based on I haven't purchased the pattern yet, but based on the description here, it just requires 2 balls of fingering weight yarn. And she used Madeline Tosh. So I have Malabrigo, Malabrigo sock that I'm going to use. I haven't completely decided what colors I'm going to be using, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be these 2. So this isn't quite as yellow as it's showing up on the camera here, but I think these 2 colors will go together since like you can kind of see this tone in some of the parts of this skein, but it's not exact. So that way, when I'm doing the 2-color brioche, because it's 2-color brioche, it should be contrasting enough. Yeah, and the thing that really drewed the thing that made me look at the pattern is that it's not only just brioche, it's brioche knit in design in such a way that it also looks like cabling. I know cabled brioche is a thing that happens with a lot of brioche stitches, but like this looks like a cabled cardigan that happens to be in brioche. And I really like that kind of interplay. I'm a big sucker for cables anyway. So that's what I'm going to do with these 2 skeins. So that's 2 more skeins out of my stash. So if anybody wants to give me some suggestions on what else I should add to my maker's dozen, I know it's kind of hard to do that with not knowing what's in my stash, but I got lots of single skeins of fingering weight yarn, not necessarily in coordinating colors, but I do have enough that can coordinate. So if you have any recommendations, please put them down in the description down below, because I still have 3 more things to make, or 3 more things to add to my maker's dozen. And I don't know what I want to do, and I would rather not just throw more socks onto the maker's dozen, because I feel like that's cheating. So for today's tutorial, since the FO podcast is our skills tutorial podcast, I received a number of comments down in the last episode of what kind of techniques and stitches and cast-ons is what I also got as well, of things to do. And I decided that today I'm going to be teaching you or showing you a couple other techniques on how to finesse the SSK knit, the slip knit decrease. So it's a left leaning decrease. Whereas the knit two together is a right leaning decrease. So that what that means is that if you stack them properly, if you stack them if you stack the stitches, you'll have angles that are going in different directions. So from your perspective, the stitches will go this way if you're stacking your SSKs, and then if you're stacking your knit two together, so they'll go in a 45-degree angle here. So what I did to prepare for this is I knit a swatch. You'll get a better look at this swatch during the tutorial. But I did a swatch here using just handicrafter cotton. I did a few different left-leaning decreases. So I kind of had a evolving mind as I was doing this. So it's not the best laid out, but we'll go over it here. So up on your screen, you're going to see a video of me more like zoomed in and pointing this out with a knitting needle here. But what I've done on this particular swatch is that I made 4 different quadrants. The first quadrant, the bottom left quadrant, is an example of doing knit two togethers and just a regular slip knit. So you're slipping 2 stitches as if to knit, and then knitting through the back loop as you would do for a normal slip knit. So that way you can see how they differ in appearance. To me, I see the knit two togethers as a straight line, where the slip knit seems to have a bit of a stepping motion to it. And that's just because of how the stitches are done. Because you are stacking your stitches, you're actually changing your tension a little bit as you're moving your stitches back and forth. So that is causing like the stitches to very, very slightly move and distort before you do your decrease, compared to the knit two together, of course. So that's why one of your stitches, at least with mine here, one of my stitches looks to be a little enlarged, a little stretched out in comparison to the stitches below them. So it's like a normal stitch, enlarged, normal, enlarged. So that's what my slip knits look like. So the next one that I did here is a technique that I found from Coco Knits, and then as well as Roxanne Richardson also discusses this on her own podcast. You can find the links to some of my sources down below. And please follow Roxanne's podcast if you don't. I know most of you probably already do, but she's fantastic. Love her. The second quadrant that I've got here is my slip knits, where you're actually slipping one as if to knit and then slipping one as if to purl, and then you're knitting through the back loop for both of these. You can also do this one by slipping one as if to knit onto your working needle and then taking that stitch and putting it back onto your offhand needles. You're really just remounting that first stitch, and then you're knitting through the back loop. And what that happens here is that you are causing the back stitch, the one that's hidden, to be knit through the back loop, causing it to be tighter than it normally would be. And then the other stitch, since you've remounted it, it accounts for that extra twist that would be there. So you're not actually adding it. So it looks like a regular old knit stitch sitting on top of it. And that does seem to cause your SSK to be a little bit flatter than it would be compared to the other one, which I'll go back and forth and show you. It does appear to be flatter. I still see the kind of like zigzag motion. And at least for me, since I'm not super versed in doing this, this is a new version of the SSK for me. I know my intention is not perfect here, so I would imagine with a little bit more practice, I can get it to be a little bit less stepped compared to my other one here. But it's a really easy modification that you can make for the SSK. We'll come back to this one, I'm sure. And then the top 2 quadrants here. So the top left one here is an example of me doing a slip stitch knitwise, knit next stitch, pass slip stitch over. You can also slip it purlwise. I've always slipped it knitwise. I think that's just a preference thing. Mine are knitwise here. So you can see that there is quite a bit of a difference between the PSSO stitch then compared to the knit two together. Most beginner knitters are starting with this left leaning decrease. At least I did. And when I see other knitters, in my experience, they've learned this one first because you're just if you know how to cast off, you know how to do this one. So you're not learning any new skills. Yeah, so that's just the example. Like, we'll call that a control, like a second control that I've done with a different technique. And then finally, the top quadrant here is a further modification of the SSK, the modified SSK. So this is listed as trick number 2 on the Coco Knits website. And what you're doing here is you are slipping as if to knit, and then you are slipping as if to purl your stitch, just like the second stitch, like the cleaner, the neater one as we did before. But as you're coming back on the back side, you are purling through the back loop of this stitch. In this case, since I did it flat, if you're working in the round, then you're going to be knitting through the back loop of that stitch. And that's just going to cause that twisted stitch to tighten up the stitch a little bit further. And it's going to make it even flatter. So out of the 4, I noticed that that particular one looks a lot cleaner than my original, like, SSK, cleaner than the newer technique. I feel that in the future, I'm probably only going to be doing the first trick where you're just slipping one knitwise, slipping one purlwise, simply because you don't have to remember it on your backside. When I was doing the swatch, every single time I forgot to purl through the back loop on that stitch, mostly because the backside of this swatch is just purls, except for one row. It's all been purls, so that probably has something to do with it. I was watching TV, just doing something this morning while I was working with it. Yeah, so so since I've explained what this swatch here, we are going to cut to the actual tutorial on how to do each of these different techniques. I'm going to be using a different yarn because I wanted to try the techniques before I did it. I'm going to be using the white yarn from before. And I'll be showing you how to do your past slip stitch over, your SSK, and then the 2 modified tricks to this stitch. We'll see you in a few minutes. Hi everyone, welcome to our tutorial on how to slip knit a little bit neater, as requested by Carrie Randall, one of our subscribers. So here I've got my swatch, so you can see the different examples of how to do your left-leaning decreases. So this one here, take out my needle so I can point to it. This one here is my normal SSKs. So this is what my SSKs look like, and these are my knit 2-togethers. And then this one over here. So this is what my SSKs looks like. So they kind of have a little bit of a zigzag sort of dealy compared to the straight line of my knit 2-togethers. Above there, you can see my pass slip stitches over stitches here. I always learned how to pass my stitches over and slipping them not purlwise. I would slip my stitches knitwise and then pass them over. That probably adds a bit too much of a twist here. You could purl, slip them purlwise, but this is how I learned how to do it. And very shortly after I learned how to do this, I learned how to do the SSK, and it's a lot neater in comparison. So you can see how this really zigzags, and this one zigzags a little bit less. And as requested, so there's a couple tricks that you can do to make your SSKs a little bit neater. So the way to do an SSK is where you slip 2 stitches knitwise, and then you insert your needle, your offhand needle, back into those stitches, so that way you can knit them through the back loop, and that's how you're getting this left-leaning decrease here. But what you can do is just do a little tweak where you slip one knitwise and slip one purlwise, and then knit them through the back loop, and you get a slightly neater and flatter stitch here. So that's one trick that you can do. And if you want to go even a step further, up here, I've done the same thing, but then as I came back on my purl side row, since I'm working back and forth on this swatch, if you're working in the round, you come back and you purl through the back loop. If you're working in the round, you would knit through the back loop here. And that further tightens up the twist. I do notice that it does twist your stitches quite a bit, so it really does tighten them, but it's also going to make those stitches look twisted. So just keep that in mind while you do it. To show you how to do that, I have just a little swatch that I started here. You can see that I've done a couple decreases. It might be a little bit hard to see because the white is rather hard to see with, but I'm just using the swatch to show you how to do it. All right, so the normal way that you would do a slip knit is you slip 2 stitches knitwise onto your needles, and then you take your offhand needle, insert it through the front of your loop here, so that way your working needle is in the back, and then you knit them both through the back loop, and that creates your slip knit. So what you can do to tidy them up a little bit, I'm just resetting my stitches here, what you can do to tidy them up a little bit is slip the first stitch knitwise, and then slip the second stitch purlwise. And what that's going to do is it's going to cause this stitch here in the next step to be twisted. And that causes that stitch to lay a little bit flatter behind it. To show you how to do that again, what you're going to do is you're going to slip 1 stitch knitwise, then you're going to slip 1 purlwise, insert your stitches, and then you're going to wrap your yarn. And that creates a little bit neater knit through the back loop. So that is one way that you can clean up your SSKs. But you can take it one step further if you go to the back side. So if you do your slip knitwise, slip purlwise, and then insert your offhand needle back and front and knit them just like you would do before, you just carry on to the end of your row. So now we're on our back side of the swatch here, and I am just going to get all the way back to my SSK. So you can tell by this side of your work here, if you look really closely, you notice that you've got a single purl bump on this stitch here, but you've got 2 sitting on this one. It's a little bit tighter there. That's where my slip knit was. So that's what that looks like for the back side. So there is my decrease right there. And this is what it looks on the back side. So what I'm going to do is when I come to the back side of this stitch, I'm going to purl through the back loop. So I'm going to insert it through the back loop, like so. Then I'm going to purl. And that twists that stitch there. So that way when we come back to the front, as I've done that before on my row down here, it tightens your stitch up a little bit. And that's how you can tighten up some of your slip knits. Personally, I don't know if that last backside stitch would work for me personally, but I'll play with it a little bit more, but that's 2 options that you have there. I hope you found this little tutorial, this little technique, helpful for you, and we'll see you next time. All right, well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. Let me know down in the comments there if you find that helpful or not, if there's any improvements I can make for future tutorials, and if there's any other tutorials you'd like me to do. I do have a running list of things that I'm going to be doing. I did receive a comment requesting spinning tutorials. That is on the list. And yeah, it is on the list. I don't know how else to put it. It's just on the list. And I will be releasing that as time goes on. So I think what I'm going to be focusing on first, since I feel more confident doing knitting tutorials as that is my expertise, I'm going to be doing more of those first, so that way I can get them out of the park. And while I'm doing those, I am going to be working to build my skills, so that way I can actually feel more confident giving you like actual tutorials about crochet and spinning, and specifically because of this question. Because I don't want to be that guy that doesn't know what he's talking about, telling you how you should be doing things, because I'm sure most of my viewers, being women, probably have been mansplained a few times in their life, and I don't want to be part of that. Anywho, so normally the last thing I'd be talking about at the end of the FO podcast is more about the masterclass for lace knitting. Unfortunately, time got away from me this week, and last week too, but time got away from me, so I wasn't able to properly prepare as much as I feel that I should to give you more details on this. I feel like I'm just going to be regurgitating stuff from Elizabeth Lovick, from Lovick, basically verbatim from her book. So I have a little bit more research that I want to distill down into a proper video. So I hope you guys don't mind that we wait another week. But I want to give you a little update. Next week, I'll be releasing just a single video on the SSK techniques compared to last week where I released 3 separate videos on the 3 different cast-on methods. I don't know if that was the best way to do it, but that's how I did it. We'll see how that goes. Thank you for everyone who watched those videos. And just keep in mind that in 2 weeks' time, we will not be doing a main podcast. I'll be doing a project-based episode, probably 20 to 30 minutes, just a shorter episode, specifically on how I'm getting along with spinning my spinning braid from Good Vibrations. So included in that is my thought process. I'll be showing you a lot of just B footage of me spinning and trying to find daytime hours to do that, so that way I'm not just artificially lighting everything. Today I am recording currently at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, but it is overcast and I'm losing light, as it were, at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Yeah, so I've got some timing things I need to work out, but I will do my best. And if I have to record some things this week, after dark, with just a bunch of lights around me, I will do that. I will try not to do that in the future, and that will get easier when I have some daytime hours after getting home from work or before going to work. We'll see how that goes. Anywho, if you think I'm the worsted, please comment. Oh, I have to do a rating. I have to do a rating. I forgot about ratings. When am I going to rate it? I am going to rate this 2 out of 2 socks by Nancy Wheeler, Freddy Beach. The Freddy Beach socks. I feel like I've been plugging Nancy quite a bit. If you don't know, Nancy has her own podcast. I know a lot of my subscribers also subscribe to her, but just in case you don't, she does have a podcast called Knit Sip Happy. If you have not heard of Nancy Wheeler, or if you are keep hearing about her, because Simone and I have been talking about her quite a bit these last couple months. If you want to see more of her, she does have a podcast that she releases, I believe, every second week, like I do, but on the off weeks. Just go to her page, link down in the description. You can find her there on YouTube. Yeah. So if you think that I'm still the worsted, please like, comment, subscribe, and share with all your friends. So I will see you in a couple weeks. Bye.